Hey guys, so I'm back with Joel Singleton, one of my good friends from Regent's Bible College that I went to. So I'll just bring him up on the screen for you now. Hey Joel,
Guys, how you doing?
good. So yeah, like I said, I went to Bible College with Joel. You guys might actually have seen him if you've been coming to Zeke for a while or been doing some of that stuff on stage because he was singing in the different bands at different events. So you might recognize him, you might not. But yeah, Joel, just let us know what you're up to nowadays. Tell us a bit about yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, sweet. I'm Joel. I am working as an assistant pastor in the church in Hereford. So I'm essentially my third year of my MIT, which in kind of Elim church terms is ministry in minister in training. So that's coming up to an end soon, which is pretty exciting. But yeah, I'm working part time as an assistant pastor within a church. A whole kind of mix of different jobs and responsibilities, from preaching pastoral care to kind of organizing kind of leadership talks, reaching out into the community. So I get to kind of be involved in a heck of a lot of different stuff. Real honor and privilege to be able to do that. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm up to at the moment.
Nice one. Sounds good. Um, so yeah, Joel's one of these guys, and I'll probably come back to this in a bit. But at college, we had like this running joke, which wasn't actually a joke because it was true. But he's literally good at everything he does. He could literally like a brand new sport, a brand new talent, whatever it is. Tell him to try it, and like second time, and he'll just like absolutely smash it. And so that's Joel. So I brought him on tonight because we're going to be talking about this topic of fasting. And I'd be right in saying, Joel, that while we were at Regent's Bible College, like you spent quite a bit of time researching it for yourself and giving it a go yourself, didn't you?
Yeah, definitely. I think it was something that was on my heart, something that I'd seen Jesus kind of say when you fast, not kind of like, guys, if you want to fast at some point. He was like, actually, when you fast, it wasn't even a thought that entered Jesus' mind that we might not. It's just like when you do this. And that really stood out to me. That struck me quite powerfully. I was going through a lot myself at Bible college. I imagine Max can also say this as well. Like everybody was
Yeah.
like, it was a real place of like trials and difficulty. Like as good as it was definitely a place where a lot of us kind of were learning about ourselves, learning how to live in such a tight knit community with other people, but also just learning about like God and who He is. And your mind just was kind of getting blown up every single day. And so for me, fasting was one of those things that actually, as a spiritual discipline, alongside like prayer and silence and solitude and all these other ones, fasting was one that God was speaking to me about there and then. So me and a few other people were like, actually, let's try it, let's do it. Had some great moments doing it. Also, other times when I didn't really feel much, it didn't really feel that powerful.
Yeah.
And so there was definitely a mix. And still to this day, like I still do it. It's still something I practice. There's moments I've done it like on a regular basis, like every week. Other times it's been a monthly thing. Even other times it's been more kind of sporadic, as and when I feel like it's the right thing to do. But yeah, a big mix, I guess. And I'm sure some of you who've done it can also like understand there's moments where it's like, man, that
Yeah.
was just the best day of fasting and prayer ever. Other times you're like, why have I done this? Like, why am I bothering to fast? Like, it doesn't feel any different. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. So yeah, we'll get more into what fasting is, what it looks like, and some of the lessons that Joel's learned as he's done that. Um, but yeah, for you guys who might just be watching this for a first episode, we've been looking at spiritual disciplines or spiritual practices. And it sounds like a weird word, but in the first episode, I literally explained it as things that you can do to get to know God better, or hear from God better. And would that be a fair comment, Joel, to describe spiritual practices like that?
Yeah, like 100%, especially when it comes to fasting. A lot of people, I think, misunderstand what fasting is, what it's for. I've heard very weird kind of out there thoughts on fasting, but what you said exactly, like getting to making that space to hear from God, and being in His presence, like they are the key kind of points of why the spiritual disciplines are in place.
Yeah. So yeah, you've probably heard fasting, the word. At this time of year, actually, during Lent, loads of people fast during Lent. And And I guess if you're not a Christian, or if you are a Christian and you've not spent any time looking at it or thinking about what it is, it's kind of one of them things that you do at this time of year because that's what everyone always does, right? But yeah, like we said, there is a purpose to all of these spiritual disciplines, and that's to get to know God better. And so we're going to look at how fasting works, and how you can get to know God better and hear from God better by doing fasting. So yeah, maybe just, Joel, share a couple of things that you've learned during fast. Or actually, no, you know what? Let's go back. Explain what fasting is, because I guess we're assuming, but some people might not know.
Sweet, yeah. Fasting, I guess, in essence, is choosing to give up something. For the most part in the Bible, we see that fasting was choosing to give up something that your body needs. And when they often talk about fasting in the Bible, in Jesus' day, it was about giving up food, right? So our bodies, they need food. We need to feed our bodies and give our bodies sustenance. But one of the things that we see Jesus say when he had that wilderness experience, and for 40 days he was being tempted and tested by the devil was like, why don't you just turn this stone into bread? Here's a man, Jesus, who is super hungry, right? Really hungry. He could do with some food. The devil says, well, then just turn this stone into bread. Jesus says, basically, we don't live on bread alone, but we live on every word that comes from God. And it's this idea of actually, yes, my body is starving and I'm really hungry right now, but bread isn't the thing that we need the most. Actually, it's God. And so fasting is choosing to give up something that our body needs to make that space to be with God. As Max said, it's about hearing from God, listening to God, being with God. There's so many misunderstandings about what fasting is, but at its core, I would say it's about giving up something that our body needs in order to make space and time to be with God.
Yeah, cool. And I know that, yeah, generally lots of people do it with food, especially during Lent, hence the pancakes and getting rid of all that stuff in your cupboards that you're not going to be eating for 40 days or whatever. But you can do it with other things like mobiles and stuff like that. Have you tried any of that kind of stuff, or has it generally been kind of food for you?
Yeah, it used to be food all the time, and then I kind of grew to realize that actually there's moments in my life where food isn't the thing that's kind of taking my attention and focus away from God. And actually, if the purpose of fasting is to make that space to be with God, to chat to him, just to listen to him, then sometimes fasting is about taking away the thing in your life that is consuming most of your time. For me, that's been things like watching TV. That's been things like gaming. It has been food most of the time, but actually probably TV and gaming were two of the other biggest things that I chose to fast, because I recognized it's so easy, right? Just to spend so much time sat in front of the screen watching TV. And I realized, man, how much of my time in a week am I doing that? So both me and my wife have spent kind of different moments throughout our life. Either it's a day, sometimes it's been a week. I remember once there was a month where I just went for a month. I'm not watching TV. I'm not watching films. I'm not watching YouTube. I'm not watching any of that kind of stuff. I wasn't playing games either at that point. And it was really refreshing. It was hard. Like, there were moments it was really hard, but actually there were plenty of incredible moments where I was able just to sit with God and focus on him and kind of reprioritize my time.
Yeah. So I guess like one of the aspects of fasting, which you might not even have realized when you first started, but it's about cutting out the things that take all of that attention.
Yeah.
And when we were chatting just before we pressed record, you said something about kind of recognizing those things that you might have addictions to that you don't realize.
Yeah. So one of the biggest lessons I've learned from fasting, and fasting, not just food, but like games, TV, and whatever else, like perhaps it's reading, perhaps it's walking, essentially things that are good for you. Like entertainment is good, right? Within kind of a parameter, but at the same time, it's recognizing when you're faced with choosing to give up those things, that's when almost you start to realize, oh, this is actually quite a big hold on me right now. that's something I learned massively. It was, I think it was either TV or games, but I was faced with choosing to give them up for a week, and I was like, it's fine, it'll be easy. That's not a problem. And then kind of like the beginning of it, like I was really struggling. I was like, what am I supposed to do with my time? How do I fill my time? Obviously, the point is to spend it with God, but actually I realized how much those things had a hold on kind of my life, my time, my commitments. And it's probably since choosing to give them up numerous times throughout my life that I've realized I want to constantly be in a position where I'm kind of posturing my heart, as it were, to always be at a place where I'm willing to give up these things to spend that time with God. And I often ask myself, I might be watching a lot of TV, and I'll ask myself, would I be willing to give this up to spend some time with God? And I always want to be in that place where I'm going to say yes. Sometimes I'm not, but for the most part I am, because I've practiced fasting those things throughout my life.
Yeah, that's really cool. So just kind of those couple things there. One about making time to spend with God, like that's the point. You're cutting it out, not just to get rid of it, but to make time to spend with God and to listen and to pray and stuff like that, which we'll talk about in other weeks. But also recognizing those things that actually we don't realize it, but am I willing to stop watching telly to spend time with God? Is actually quite a massive thing to realize, I guess, if you've not noticed before.
Because if I can add to that, I think there's a guy called John Piper. I think it's him that said this quote, but he said the greatest adversaries, or the greatest kind of oppositions to God, are God's gifts. And at first I heard that, I was like, hang on a second, so the biggest kind of adversaries, the enemies to God, are his own gifts? How does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then you start to think about it and you're like, okay, essentially he's saying God gives us these incredible gifts, like food, like entertainment, like the freedom to go for walks, all these kind of things, right? God gives us these incredible gifts. But we as humans have this pattern of taking what God gives us and then holding on to that and running away with that and forgetting God altogether.
Yeah.
And so there's this passage in Deuteronomy 8. If I just quickly read it out to you. In Deuteronomy 8, going from verse 11, it says, "Take care, unless you forget the Lord your God, by not keeping his commandments and his rules and his statutes, which I command you today." So this is the Old Testament. He's like, basically, take care not to forget what God's told you to do. For us today, it's committing our whole being to him. It's our life being a life of worship and sacrifice to him. And he goes on to say in verse 12, unless when you've eaten and are full, so you've got the food, you've got everything you need, you're feeling full, you're feeling satisfied. He goes on, you've built good houses and you're living in them. When your herds and your flocks multiply, today that might be like when you've got the car that you want and you've got this that you want and you've got these things in life that you want. And essentially saying, when you're comfortable, when you've got everything you want, like I've blessed you with these things, you get comfortable. Be careful, because your heart might be lifted up and you forget the Lord your God. And then he goes on later to say, be aware lest you say in your heart, it's my power and the might of my hand that have gotten me these things. And how crazy is that? God's blessed them with all these incredible things. For us today, God's blessed us with food. He's blessed us with clothing. He's blessed us with water to drink. He's blessed us with friends. He's blessed us with entertainment. He's blessed us with so many things. And he says, be careful unless you say that your power and the might of your hand have got you this wealth. You shall remember the Lord your God. Get this, for it's he who gives you power to get wealth. I love that.
Yeah.
It's basically that idea that the only reason that you're able to kind of perhaps work and get all these blessings and get food and be clothed and have a roof above your head and stuff is because he's given you the ability to have that.
Yeah.
And I love that's the idea that actually for us it's so easy, isn't it? Most of us probably don't even think of food as a gift from God. We just think of it as it's my right. I just deserve to have food, like it's just what humanity has, right? We don't think of food that often as a gift. But I don't know if you're a Christian or you're not, you might have heard people pray around the table and they thank God for the food he's given to them. But I think that's where it comes from. Like fasting is choosing, I love this, fasting is choosing to forego the gift that God has given you in order to have God himself. How cool is that? Fasting is choosing, saying, God, thank you for this gift. but I'm going to choose to give it up for a time being because I recognize you're the one who gave me that gift, and you are so much more important than that gift is, even though when I am having it, I'm still going to cherish it and thank you for it and enjoy it.
Yeah, that's so true. Like, it's almost like birthday or Christmas. You know, you get all these presents off your parents, but it's almost like, kind of, imagine if you just disregarded your parents
Yeah,
completely and were like, "Oh, get lost. I don't really care about you, but now I'm
yeah.
just gonna focus on these gifts for the rest of the year and
And then
ignore you."
you manage to convince yourself that somehow you bought the gift for yourself,
Yeah,
and your parents have got nothing to do with it.
yeah. Like, there's no gratitude or anything. So
Yeah,
yeah, and I guess kind of that's so true, and that's a massive like hit when you realize that, isn't it? That all of this stuff like food, water, even some of the stuff that we might class as luxury, like gaming, TV, stuff like
yeah,
that. We think, oh, I earned that with my money, or my parents earned that with their money, and so that's mine. But actually, it's all a gift from God, um,
exactly.
that we're blessed with it. Yeah, that's so
I think
cool.
fasting is recognizing that and saying, thank you, God, for these luxuries. Thank you for food. But like I said, I'm going to choose a time to put those things aside, like you might do with your parents. Thanks for giving me this gift. I recognize you're the one that gave me this gift, and I want to spend time with you, um, whilst also still at points enjoying the gift you've given me.
Yeah,
And it's the same with God.
yeah, that's so cool. And I guess we've always said at Ziki that kind of God speaks to different people in different ways, and stuff like that. And I guess right there, like, that's a way that God speaks to us, by reminding us of the things that He's blessed us with, and by continuing to bless us with stuff.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's super cool.
yeah.
Um, in terms of that kind of fasting as an opportunity for you to grow closer to God and
Mhm.
hear from God, um, is there any specific times in your life where that's happened, where it's not just been kind of like a general lesson where you've realized, oh yeah, kind of, I need to focus more on God rather than His gifts?
Yeah,
But is there any kind of specific time where you've grown close to God through fasting?
yeah, 100%. Like, I think it's twofold in a sense. There's moments in my life where, if I can be honest without going into too much detail, I've struggled in a certain sin when I was younger, and it got me into a really dark place, and I wasn't doing well at all. And I just felt God say, just take a day out to fast and to pray. I remember doing that for the whole day and just spent that time with God. I wasn't eating food, and I was just in God's presence. And the next day, I felt this just incredible freedom, from this sin that I just kept committing again and again and again. God completely, broke that from me, and it was just the most freeing thing in the world. And that's because I spent that time dedicated to God's presence, being in God's presence. I wasn't distracted by other things. I was just focused on God. And then the next day, this just sense of almost just refreshing and feeling quite light. That was incredible. That was really, really phenomenal. And then there's definitely been other times in my life where I've I've just heard a lot clearer from God, and I think
Yeah,
that's such a big part of fasting. I think, if I can say, what I believe one of the misconceptions about fasting is that we fast in order to get an answer to prayer, as though, like, if I'm
yeah,
fasting and if I show God that I'm willing to give up food, God's basically got to answer my prayer and give me what I want. But that's
yeah,
that's not the point of fasting. Like, the whole point is just to be with God, and actually, more than us having our prayers answered, it's creating a space for us to listen to God, and that's
yeah,
so essential. It's creating a space for us to stop chatting so much and just listen to God. I think it's a both and, isn't it? It is a
yeah,
place to ask God for things in prayer, but it's about listening to God, because when you're listening to God, you're going to hear Him respond to you about the things you're praying for. And
yeah,
that's so important, because you can keep praying for something again and again and again, but if you're never going to listen to God, if He's saying, no, that's not what I want for you, this is what I want for you, then what's the point? Like, the whole point is, prayer is a conversation, and I'm sure you're going to talk about prayer in future sessions, but, like,
yeah,
the point of fasting is to create space to listen to God away from distractions, away from other things, dedicate that time to Him. And I can tell you the majority of the time I've done that, I have sensed God's presence in a much stronger way. I have heard God like speak a lot clearer. I've fasted with my wife a couple of times, and she's experienced God speaking to her, and then I've been like, oh yeah, he's saying the same thing to me as well in that moment, in that day.
So cool.
And I believe that's because we're moving distractions aside and we're creating space. One of the quotes I'd want to say is, fasting pushes aside all the wants and noises of the world to make room for the desires and voice of God.
Yeah, that's so true. And back to that that first kind of personal story about the sin. It's funny because I'd always say like sin is saying shove off God, I'm in charge, not you. It's not just doing bad stuff, but it's actually living your life according to yourself rather than being obedient to God. And so I guess the whole aspect of fasting is saying I'm going to push everything else aside, everything that I enjoy and everything that I would choose to do, but to put God first. And so I guess really we act surprised, don't we, when the outcome is that God had this massive impact where he stopped us from that certain sin that we were caught in. But actually, when you think about it logically, like it's natural that we would be able to stop that sin. When focusing on God is the opposite of sin. So yeah, that's so cool. But yeah, fasting isn't just something in the Bible that we're told to do. It's not just something that traditionally we do at Easter, but it can transform aspects of your life and also get rid of the stuff that blocks us from hearing what God is saying. So yeah, that's super cool. Was there anything else that you've learned from fasting, or perhaps practical tips on how best to fast, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think there's a few things really. Obviously, for some of you watching, you guys, you might have some kind of a medical condition that's going to kind of exempt you from fasting. Like, I want to say, like, it's not a command, and that's the thing about fasting. People are like, is it commanded? Is it not commanded? Jesus said, when you fast. And so the kind of expectation is, as followers of Jesus, it's a good spiritual discipline. Clearly, we've just heard all of the benefits of fasting, the fruit of fasting, the reason why we fast. And so it just makes sense for those of us who love Jesus, have that relationship with him, to fast and to set that time aside. But God completely understands our bodies. He understands us. He understands what we're going through. And so the beautiful thing of it not being a command is that there's going to be times in our life where actually we're not going to fast because it's not going to be helpful for us. We actually can't fast because of some sort of physical thing that we're going through. But then there's going to be other times in our life where actually it could be quite essential, or you just want to try it. But I would say practically, like, fasting in the Bible, I think they often fasted from like the evening meal the night before through to the evening meal the next night. And so a lot of people will essentially like have their evening meal and then they won't have anything else afterwards. And then they'll miss breakfast the next day, they'll miss lunch the next day, and they'll wait until the evening meal. Funny story, last time I fasted, me and my wife were fasting. We just had food. We were like, great, we're going to be fasting. I went into probably 15 minutes later, I go into the kitchen, grab a yogurt, come and sit down. And she's looking at me weird, but she didn't say anything. I was like, what? While she's looking at me, I'm opening the yogurt packet and she's like, what are you doing? I was like, what do you mean, what am I doing? I'm eating the yogurt. And she's like, we're fasting. I was like, legit, like 15 minutes afterwards. It was the funniest thing.
True.
But yeah, I would say that like some people I know have fasted for like a week, and that's mental. But if you've never done it before, like start small and grow from there, because actually like it can be dangerous if you're going to do it for a super long time. But yeah, practically that's a good time to do it. There's been moments where I've done it kind of for a whole day. So I've done morning, I've done breakfast, lunch, and then tea. And then I've had breakfast the next day. So I've kind of missed out a whole day, which might work for you. Other times you could just pick a meal, just fast one meal in a day, and choose to say, actually, on this day, this meal time, I'm going to choose to fast. Be smart about it. Don't, if you're kind of doing physical exercise, perhaps pick a day that you're not going to do a workout I can guarantee you, if you're trying to do a workout and fast, you are going to collapse. Like it's not good. Recognize that if you are going to fast and you've done that, you're going to have your evening meal. That's fine, but you might actually be quite tired the next day. So that's what I've often found. I've often been pretty kind of wiped the day after, just because the day before I haven't had as much food as I usually would. And then it's up to you, like how you want to do it. There's times where I've just had water and I've been fasting, just having water. Other times I've had like squash, coffee, tea. I've had other drinks and I've done it like that. So yeah, mix it up.
Cool. And that's the thing with all of these spiritual practices. We've said we want to get away from that. The way I pray is by putting my hands together and shutting my eyes, because that's what we're meant to do. But actually, these spiritual practices and disciplines are between you and God, and they're all to help you get to know God better. And so you need to do what works for you. And so if you want to skip breakfast but still have lunch and dinner, lunch and tea, whatever you call it, then do that, because the whole purpose is to get rid of distractions, to find extra time to spend with God, and even just by missing one meal, you're doing that. And so, and again, that point about if you medically shouldn't be skipping meals, don't do that. But that also doesn't mean that you can't fast. Like, look for the next best thing that you spend all your time doing. So that might be getting rid of your phone for a day or something like that. But
not watching that Netflix series.
Not binging out on it. But yeah, awesome. Well, Joel, thanks for sharing with us. That's been super helpful. But guys, give it a go. Give fasting a go. Why not? But I guess the key points are we're getting rid of it to spend time with God. So don't just stop eating, but play Xbox instead, because it's not doing quite the thing. And while you're doing that, focus on God. Speak to him. He can hear you. It's just like me and Joel speaking to each other. But yeah, nice one.
Yeah, sound.
There we go. Well, Joel, I'm going to leave you. But yeah, thanks for your time.
No worries. Thanks, Max.
And we'll catch you later.
Yeah, catch you later.